You thought she was the one. You thought you could trust her. But what if everything you knew was a lie? One simple message, one casual brunch, and suddenly, the foundation of your entire relationship is shattered. I was content. We had been together for 3 years, living together for a year and a half, sharing everything. I thought we were solid, that nothing could break us apart. But then came the surprise. A brunch with the girls, or so she said. That was the plan, right? It wasn't long before I saw her Instagram stories, showing her laughing with friends on a rooftop bar. But there was someone else in those stories, her ex. The one she always claimed was a thing of the past. He was part of their friend group now, she said. But how could I ignore the way they were so comfortable around each other? How could I ignore the way he touched her necklace, the way they shared food? That's when I knew something wasn't right. Something was off. The rest of the day was a blur. I stayed calm, didn't make a scene. But deep down, my gut told me everything I needed to know. And from that moment on, I couldn't unsee it. I couldn't pretend everything was fine anymore. This was no longer just about a boyfriend being jealous. This was about respect. And once that's gone, what's left? The morning started like any other. Jessica was getting ready for brunch with her friends. She did that thing where she tried on 3 different outfits before ultimately settling on the first one. It was a Saturday, and we were both in the routine of enjoying our weekends. She kissed me goodbye, said she was meeting the girls for bottomless mimosas. I didn't think much of it. I had plans to catch up on work anyway. The day was mine to get things done. I didn't expect anything unusual. But then, around noon, I was sitting on the couch, trying to focus on my laptop, when her Instagram story popped up. There she was, laughing, having a good time on a rooftop bar. But the strange thing? It wasn't just the girls. I saw him, Richard. Her ex. The one she had dated for years, the one who moved away to Seattle, the one she said she had no feelings for anymore. Yet, there he was, in her story. At first, I tried to brush it off. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe I was just overthinking it. But the more I watched, the more it started to bother me. There was no mistaking the way they interacted. Richard fixing her necklace? Sharing food? Little things, small touches, but enough to make my stomach turn. I didn't want to jump to conclusions. So, I tried to give her the benefit of the doubt. I sent a text. "How's brunch?" I asked. She replied, "Amazing. Becca ordered like 3 desserts. We're just having a blast." But when I asked who else was there, she only mentioned the girls. No mention of Richard. Something wasn't right. I sat there, scrolling through her story again, feeling the tightness in my chest. I kept telling myself it was fine. Maybe it was just harmless fun. After all, Richard was supposedly part of their friend group now, right? But deep down, I knew better. Something didn't sit right. By the time Jessica came home around 4, tipsy and glowing from the mimosas, I was still on the couch. She asked what I wanted for dinner. I said, "Whatever you want. I'm easy." She didn't notice the half-empty closet. Didn't notice my missing laptop setup. Didn't seem to realize anything was off. We ate, we watched Netflix. She curled up on my shoulder like everything was normal. But inside, I was far from calm. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was happening behind my back. I couldn't get the image of her laughing with him out of my head. I couldn't ignore the doubts that had begun to creep in. That night, I stayed up. I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about everything. Our relationship, our plans for the future, how I thought we were solid. And that's when it hit me. I wasn't just being paranoid. I wasn't just reacting out of jealousy. No, this was about respect. About honesty. I realized that if I didn't confront this now, it would fester. It would eat away at me, and I wouldn't be able to let it go. I had to act. I didn't argue. I didn't confront her right then. I waited. I let her shower, let her relax. I did 3 things. First, I checked our lease. I found out that only my name was on it, always had been. We'd talked about adding her, but life got in the way. Second, I texted my buddy Joseph. He owned a storage unit business, and I knew he could help me. Third, I started packing. I didn't make it dramatic. I didn't throw things around. I just packed, methodically. Important documents first, then electronics, then clothes. Whatever I could fit in my car without it being obvious. I didn't want to make a scene. But I wasn't going to just sit here and let this go on anymore. Jessica came out of the shower, towel drying her hair, completely oblivious. She didn't notice the empty spots in the closet. She didn't notice the laptop that wasn't there. She just asked, "What do you want for dinner?" I told her, "Whatever you want." She went on about her day. We ordered Thai food, we ate, we watched Netflix. She fell asleep on my shoulder, like nothing had happened. But I was awake. By 3 a.m., I was finished. I packed the last of my things and wrote a note. Okay. Yeah, I'm being controlling, I wrote. But I'm removing myself from the equation. Rent's paid through the end of the month. Your stuff is safe. Please be out by the 30th. I didn't want to drag this out. I didn't want to waste any more time. The decision had been made. It was over. I drove to Joseph's place that night. His spare room had been cleared out months ago when his marriage fell apart. Funny how life works out. I didn't respond to Jessica's calls. I didn't need to. The next day, things started to escalate. Jessica tried calling again. She texted. She messaged. But I didn't engage. At 7 a.m., my phone started blowing up with messages from mutual friends. They'd heard her side of the story. They heard how I had abandoned her. How I had a paranoid episode and couldn't handle her having male friends. She was playing the victim, twisting everything. I didn't respond. Instead, I posted the screenshots, the ones from her Instagram story. I let everyone see what had really happened. The narrative shifted fast. Within an hour, I had messages from friends who had been on Jessica's side. Now, they were asking questions. They wanted to know what had really happened. I didn't need to explain. The evidence spoke for itself. But then, she showed up. She came to my office, in full performance mode. Hair done, makeup perfect, wearing the dress I had bought her for her birthday. She wanted 5 minutes. I wasn't having it. I told her to leave. She tried to make a scene, but I wouldn't give her the satisfaction. She raised her voice. People started to look. My boss walked by, raising an eyebrow. I couldn't let this happen here. I told her to leave. She insisted we talk. So, we went to a conference room. And that's when the emotional manipulation started. She cried, of course. Pretty tears. Not the ugly kind. The kind that made her seem vulnerable. I'm sorry I lied about Richard, she said. But you have to understand. I didn't want to hear it. I don't have to understand anything, I replied. You lied. You chose to lie to my face. You chose to make me doubt everything. And that's when the real confrontation happened. She tried to defend herself, but I had made up my mind. This wasn't about her mistakes. This was about her not respecting me. About her breaking my trust. And I was done. The moment she sat down in the conference room, her face was already painted with the mask of vulnerability. Tears were welling up in her eyes, but they weren't the kind of tears that signaled regret. No, these were the carefully crafted tears that people use when they know they've done something wrong but want to make you feel guilty for noticing. I'm sorry I lied about Richard, she started, her voice shaky but controlled. But you have to understand, I didn't want to hurt you. I leaned back in my chair, not letting her see the anger bubbling up inside me. I needed to keep my calm. I needed to let her hang herself with her own words. "You're sorry you lied, but you're not sorry for what you did," I said, my voice steady. "You've been lying to me for months, Jessica. You said Richard was part of the friend group, but it's clear he's been something else to you. And you knew exactly what you were doing. You knew how I would feel, and you went ahead and did it anyway." Her eyes darted around the room as if she could find a way to deflect the blame. She wiped a tear from her cheek and sniffed, but the act wasn't convincing anymore. "I told you, he's just a friend," she insisted, her voice rising slightly in desperation. "I didn't want to hurt you, David. I swear, I didn't think it would bother you this much. He means nothing to me now." "Really?" I shot back. "Then why does he get to be so close? Why are you posting stories with him, laughing and sharing intimate moments while I'm sitting at home, waiting for you? Why were you hiding it in the first place if it didn't mean anything?" She flinched at the sharpness of my words, but she quickly recovered. "You're being unreasonable. I told you, I'm an adult. I can have male friends. You're just insecure. You can't handle me being independent. That's not my problem." The words stung, but I didn't flinch. "No, Jessica. This isn't about me being insecure. This is about you not respecting me. This is about you choosing him over me again. How many times am I supposed to sit here, pretending I don't see what's happening?" For a brief moment, her anger flashed across her face. She looked like she was about to snap, but then something changed. It was like a switch flipped, and the vulnerability came rushing back, more intense than before. "I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice soft, pleading. "I never meant for it to get this far. Please, David, don't walk away from me. I love you. Please don't throw everything we've built away." My heart was torn. The woman I had loved for so long, the one I had shared everything with, was sitting right in front of me, but she wasn't the same person anymore. The love I once felt had been replaced with a cold, bitter reality. "I've already made up my mind," I said, my voice low and final. "You can't keep playing the victim and pretending nothing happened. You've crossed a line that I can't come back from. This isn't about love anymore. It's about trust, and you've broken that trust too many times." She sat there, frozen, like she couldn't believe what I was saying. I could see the panic in her eyes as the reality of what was happening sank in. She started to speak again, but I held up my hand, cutting her off. "Save it, Jessica," I said, standing up. "You have 3 weeks to find a new place. If you need help with the deposit money, I'll transfer it to you. But we're done. You've made your choices, and now you have to live with them." I turned to leave, but before I could walk out of the room, she stopped me with one last, desperate plea. "Please, don't do this," she begged, her voice trembling. "We can fix this. I'll cut Richard off. I'll do anything. Please, don't leave me." I stopped for a moment, my back still turned to her. "You've already made your choice. You've shown me who you are, Jessica. And now, it's my turn to show you who I am. I'm done being played." I walked out of that room with my head held high, but inside, I was a mess. It felt like I was walking away from a life I had built, from someone I had loved. But deep down, I knew it was the right decision. I couldn't keep letting her lie to me, make excuses, and think I would just accept it. I deserved more than that. As I left the office building, I could feel the weight of the decision settling in. But I wasn't sure if I felt relief or emptiness. Maybe a little bit of both. That night, the text started again. But this time, it wasn't from Jessica. It was from Richard. "Hey, man," the message started. "I heard you and Jessica split. That's rough. If you want to talk, I'm here." I couldn't help but laugh. The audacity of this guy. He had the nerve to reach out to me after everything that had happened. But I didn't respond right away. I wanted to see how far he'd go. I pulled up his profile and started scrolling through his messages, remembering how he'd been a constant presence in Jessica's life, even when she claimed he was nothing more than a friend. I was done playing games. So, I did some digging. I found out Richard wasn't even single. He'd been dating someone named Barbara for 8 months. Her Instagram was full of cute couple pictures, all tagged with Richard and Barbara. There was no mention of him hanging out with his ex. I didn't waste any time. I responded to his message with a simple one-liner: "If you're really just friends, you won't mind if I send these messages to your girlfriend." His response came quickly. "Dude, we're just friends. Nothing happened. You don't have to make this worse." I took a screenshot of that conversation and sent it to Barbara. "Hey," I wrote. "I think we need to talk. You should know about Richard and Jessica." Barbara's reply came almost immediately. I knew something was off. "We need to meet." It wasn't long before I was sitting across from Barbara at a Starbucks downtown, listening to her share everything. She showed me texts between Richard and Jessica, texts that were damning. They'd been in contact for months, making plans, talking about their future, even discussing trips they'd taken together. "How long has this been going on?" I asked her. "At least 4 months," she replied. "Maybe longer. I found out after you messaged me." We spent the next hour comparing notes, putting everything together. Richard and Jessica had been lying to both of us, manipulating the situation and playing us against each other. Barbara was done. She'd kicked Richard out the night before, changed the locks, and sent him packing. She even had proof of the affair: screenshots, dates, times, everything we needed to expose their lies. I had my own evidence. I had everything documented, every lie, every false claim. I had all the pieces to make sure this was over once and for all. That night, I forwarded the evidence to my lawyer, ready to take the next step. I wasn't going to let Jessica get away with this anymore. She had no idea what was coming. The days after our conversation in the conference room passed in a blur. I didn't talk to Jessica much after that. She sent a few texts, a few calls, but I ignored them. I didn't need any more explanations or apologies. I had already made up my mind. I spent the next few days thinking. Really thinking about everything, about our relationship, the lies, the trust that had been shattered beyond repair. I thought about the future we had once planned, about the house, about the life we had shared. And I thought about the person I had been. The person I thought I knew. But now, I was seeing things clearly. I couldn't ignore it anymore. The betrayal was too deep. The trust was gone. And no matter how many times Jessica tried to tell me it would be okay, it wouldn't. I couldn't live in a house where I was constantly questioning the person next to me. Where I felt like I was competing for her attention, not with other people, but with her past. The decision was made. I had to leave. I started preparing. Slowly, methodically. I had to be careful. I didn't want to make a scene, but I also didn't want to stick around for the inevitable drama. I grabbed a few boxes from the closet and started packing my things. I wasn't being dramatic. I wasn't throwing everything in a fit of anger. I was just taking what was mine. I started with the small things, the little items that felt like they had no significance but meant everything. My books, my records, the random trinkets I had picked up over the years. I packed them with care, even though I knew they weren't the things I would miss the most. The next thing I packed was my electronics. I unplugged the TV, the gaming system, my laptop. I didn't want to leave anything behind that felt too personal, too connected to the life we had built. I knew I wouldn't be coming back. Not to this apartment, not to this version of my life. Then came the hardest part: my clothes. I stood in front of the closet for a long time, just staring. The clothes I had picked out for our weekend trips, the shirts I had bought when we went shopping together, the jacket she had said she liked. It all felt like a different lifetime. But I grabbed them anyway, folding them neatly as if I could preserve something of the good times we had shared. Jessica came home around 4 p.m. that day. I didn't want to make things harder than they already were, so I didn't say anything. She walked in, still wearing the same dress she had worn when we fought. Her hair was messier than usual, and I could tell she was already starting to feel the tension between us. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "What's for dinner?" she asked, trying to keep things normal, like nothing had changed. "Whatever you want," I said, my voice flat. "I'm easy." She didn't notice the half-empty closet or the fact that I was packing. She didn't notice how much was missing from the living room or how quiet I was. She didn't notice anything. It was almost as if she thought everything would just go back to normal with time. We ordered pizza and watched Netflix, like we always did. But the routine felt hollow. I felt like I was sitting in a stranger's house, waiting for a moment that would never come. She rested her head on my shoulder, laughing at some joke on the screen, but I couldn't laugh. I couldn't pretend anymore. As the night wore on, I found myself thinking more and more about the decision I had made. It wasn't just about leaving her. It was about leaving behind a life I thought I had built with someone who wasn't who I thought she was. It wasn't just about ending a relationship, it was about cutting ties with everything that had once felt like home. When the clock struck 3 a.m., I couldn't sit still any longer. The weight of everything, the lies, the betrayal, the heartbreak, it was all too much. I finished packing the last of my things and grabbed a pen. I wrote a note. Okay. Yeah, I'm being controlling," I wrote, my words feeling cold, detached. "But I'm removing myself from the equation. Rent's paid through the end of the month. Your stuff is safe. Please be out by the 30th. It felt final. It felt right. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't upset. I was just done. I left the note on the kitchen counter, grabbed the last of my bags, and walked out the door. I drove to Joseph's place. He had cleared out his spare room months ago after his own breakup. It felt strange, but also strangely comforting. I didn't want to be alone in the apartment anymore, surrounded by the ghosts of what used to be. I needed space. I needed to clear my head. The next day, Jessica started calling and texting. I didn't pick up. I didn't respond. I couldn't. I knew what she would say. I knew she would try to fix things, tell me it was all a mistake. But I couldn't go back. I couldn't undo what had been done. At 7 a.m., my phone started blowing up with messages from mutual friends. They had heard Jessica's side of the story. They said I was paranoid. They said I was overreacting. But they didn't know the full story. They didn't know what she had done. They didn't know how deep the betrayal ran. I didn't bother explaining. Instead, I posted the screenshots, the ones from her Instagram story, the ones that showed her laughing with Richard, the one that showed him fixing her necklace. I let everyone see the truth. I wasn't going to let her spin this into something it wasn't. Not anymore. Within an hour, the narrative started to shift. People started messaging me, asking questions, trying to understand. Some were angry at me, but others started to see the truth. It wasn't about jealousy. It wasn't about control. It was about respect. By the end of the day, Jessica showed up at my office. I was in a meeting with clients when our receptionist knocked on the door. "There's someone here to see you. Says it's urgent." I excused myself, walked into the lobby, and there she was. Jessica, standing in front of me, looking more like a performance than a real person. Her hair was perfect, her makeup flawless. She wore the dress I had bought her for her birthday, the one she knew I loved. "David, please. 5 minutes. Just 5 minutes," she pleaded, her voice trembling. I didn't want to hear it. "I'm in a meeting." "You need to leave," I said, my voice firm. "I can't believe you're doing this," she whispered, but the words didn't hit me the way they used to. "You don't have the right to do this," I replied, turning to walk away. But she didn't stop. She followed me. She wanted me to listen to her. But I couldn't. I had already listened for too long. When I got back to my office, I felt exhausted. But the decision was made. There was no going back. The next few days were a blur of messages, calls, and unanswered questions. Jessica couldn't seem to accept what had happened. She tried calling me constantly, but I didn't answer. Every time my phone buzzed with her name, my stomach twisted, but I stayed strong. I couldn't fall back into the same pattern. By the third day, the messages had started to change. They weren't just apologetic anymore. Now, they were accusatory. She had shifted the narrative. She said I was being controlling. She told everyone that I had abandoned her. That I couldn't handle the fact that she had male friends. She painted herself as the victim, and I was the villain in the story. At first, I didn't know how to respond. Part of me wanted to explain myself. I wanted to tell everyone the truth, to lay out everything I had discovered. But I didn't want to play into her drama. I knew the truth, and that was enough. Then, the messages from Richard started. He wasn't just messaging me anymore. He was messaging my friends too. "Hey man, I heard about you and Jessica. I'm sorry things ended this way, but don't let jealousy get in the way of your happiness. She's just a friend to me, dude. You're throwing it all away for nothing." I couldn't believe it. Richard had the nerve to reach out to me, after everything. After I had found out about their months-long affair. I could almost hear his voice dripping with false sympathy. He was trying to sound like the reasonable one. The one who was just trying to be a good friend. But I wasn't falling for it. I wasn't going to let him twist the story. I went back to the screenshots. The ones that showed Richard texting Jessica at all hours, making plans, talking about trips, exchanging intimate details. The messages were damning, and I wasn't going to let him act like he hadn't been part of the problem. So, I decided to reach out to Barbara. I had spoken to her once already, but I wanted to make sure she knew the full picture. I knew she had already kicked Richard out, but I needed to hear it from her again. She agreed to meet me for coffee. We sat down at a Starbucks downtown, and I could see it in her eyes. She looked exhausted, like she was carrying the weight of everything that had happened. She wasn't angry at me. She was just done. And I understood. We started talking, comparing notes. She showed me the texts, the messages that were exchanged between Richard and Jessica. I knew the affair had been going on for months, but seeing it all laid out in black and white was a punch to the gut. They'd planned trips together, discussed their future, and shared intimate moments. Things I never thought were possible. "I just wanted to make sure you knew," Barbara said, her voice steady. "Richard's been lying to everyone. He told everyone you were the problem. That you couldn't handle her having male friends, that you were controlling." I nodded, feeling the anger rise in my chest again. It was all part of the narrative. The same one Jessica had been spinning. She was trying to make me out to be the bad guy while she played the innocent, heartbroken victim. "I know," I said. "I've been dealing with the same thing. She's telling everyone I abandoned her, that I was paranoid. She's making me sound like the villain. But none of them know the truth." Barbara slid a flash drive across the table. "Everything's on here. The texts, the dates, the receipts. Everything you need to prove they were lying. If you need it." I felt a rush of gratitude, mixed with something darker. This was the proof I needed. This was the ammunition I could use to shut down their lies once and for all. Before I left, Barbara shared one more thing with me. "I found out something else. Jessica's been posting about you on Instagram. Talking about how she's survived emotional abuse, how you were controlling, how you broke her heart. It's all over her feed. And she's getting hundreds of supportive messages from people who have no idea what really happened." I felt the rage build inside me. Jessica was trying to take the high road. She was playing the victim, but she wasn't the victim here. She wasn't the one who had been lied to, manipulated, and betrayed. "She's still living in your apartment, isn't she?" Barbara asked, her eyes narrowing. I nodded. Yeah. She hasn't left yet. She thinks she's entitled to stay, but I've already spoken to my lawyer. She's not going to get away with this. Barbara's expression softened. Good. She needs to be held accountable for what she's done. I left the meeting feeling both empowered and disgusted. Empowered because I finally had the proof to back up everything I had been saying. Disgusted because Jessica was still out there, lying, manipulating, trying to destroy my reputation while she played the role of the broken-hearted ex. As I drove back to Joseph's place, my mind raced. What was I going to do now? How was I going to deal with all of this? I couldn't just let it go. I couldn't let her get away with trying to ruin me. I decided to reach out to my lawyer. I had to act fast. Jessica was getting too comfortable. She was still posting on social media, still pretending to be the victim, still painting me as the bad guy. I couldn't let that continue. By the time I got home, I had a plan. I had everything I needed to take the next step. It was time to make sure Jessica knew that she couldn't just walk all over me. It was time to put an end to her lies once and for all. The next day, I forwarded everything to my lawyer, the texts, the Instagram posts, the receipts, everything. He was ready to take action. The longer Jessica stayed in that apartment, the more she was digging herself into a hole. She was trying to control the narrative, but now it was time for me to take control of the situation. It was time for her to face the consequences of her actions. And this time, I wasn't going to let her lie her way out of it. The following days were a whirlwind. I'd forwarded everything to my lawyer, the texts, the screenshots, even the evidence Barbara had given me. My lawyer had gone through it all, and he was confident we had a strong case. Jessica's social media posts, her accusations of abuse, her behavior in the apartment, all of it could be used against her. But I wasn't sure what would happen next. I had lived with the constant uncertainty of what Jessica was going to do, what story she was going to spin next, and how I was going to respond. The truth was on my side, but that didn't mean things would be easy. I didn't hear from Jessica for a couple of days after the last time we spoke. She didn't call or text. But I knew she was still living in the apartment. She hadn't moved out yet, still trying to hold on to what was no longer hers. The moment I received a call from my lawyer, I knew things were about to get real. He had set up an emergency court hearing to address the situation with Jessica. He explained that Jessica's public defamation, combined with her refusal to vacate the apartment, had created a legally hostile environment. I couldn't just wait around any longer. I needed to take action. I showed up at the courthouse the next morning in my best suit, feeling both nervous and determined. This wasn't just about ending a relationship anymore. It was about reclaiming my life and my peace of mind. It was about putting an end to the lies and manipulation. Jessica showed up late, of course, with Richard in tow. The two of them, still playing the perfect couple, still pretending like nothing had ever happened. It was almost laughable how they thought they could continue their charade. They had no idea what was coming. When we entered the courtroom, my lawyer handed over the evidence. The lease, showing that I was the sole tenant. The Instagram posts Jessica had made, calling me an abuser. The selfie she had posted, even though she was still living in my apartment. The proof of Richard's affair with Jessica, including the text messages between them, all carefully documented. It was overwhelming. The judge, an older woman with a no-nonsense attitude, glanced over the documents. She didn't waste any time. She immediately questioned Jessica's actions. "You're accusing Mr. Peterson of abuse," the judge said, her voice steady. "Yet you are living in his apartment. You've publicly called him an abuser, but you are continuing to occupy his property, and you are entertaining guests. This creates a hostile environment. I'm not sure how you reconcile these actions with your accusations." Jessica's lawyer tried to argue, to pull at the heartstrings, but the judge wasn't having it. She cut him off. "Your client's credibility is severely undermined by her actions. This is not about emotional distress. This is about the facts, and the facts are clear. She's living in Mr. Peterson's apartment while publicly accusing him of abuse. That is unacceptable. I could see the panic in Jessica's eyes. She wasn't used to people not believing her. She wasn't used to being confronted with the truth. Her lawyer quickly asked for a recess, and they huddled in the corner, whispering urgently. Jessica kept glancing over at me, but this time, she wasn't angry. She was scared. When they returned, Jessica's lawyer spoke again, but the tone had shifted. They weren't demanding anything anymore. Instead, they were offering a compromise. Your Honor, he said, we are prepared to agree to vacate the premises within 48 hours if Mr. Peterson agrees not to pursue any defamation claims against my client. I didn't respond immediately. My lawyer glanced at me, waiting for my decision. It felt like I had the upper hand, but I also knew I didn't want to drag this out any longer. I wanted to move on with my life. I took a deep breath, then nodded. I'm fine with that, I said. I just want her out. I've had enough. The judge finalized the agreement, and Jessica reluctantly signed it. She didn't even look at me as she did. She just signed the papers, her expression cold, her eyes avoiding mine. As we left the courthouse, Richard tried to stop me in the hallway. His face was pale, his arrogance gone. Hey man, he started, trying to sound sincere. For what it's worth, I'm sorry. I didn't mean for things to go this way. I wasn't in the mood for apologies. Save it, Richard, I said, cutting him off. You've already caused enough damage. He opened his mouth to say something else, but I was done listening. I walked away, my mind already focused on what was next. The apartment was mine again. Jessica had 48 hours to leave, and the truth had come out. I had won, but I didn't feel victorious. It wasn't a win I wanted. There was no joy in exposing someone's lies, in seeing them exposed for what they were. The next few days were quiet. Jessica packed her things, but there was no confrontation. She didn't try to fight me on the agreement. She didn't try to make things right. She just left. When the 48 hours passed, I walked into the apartment. It felt different. Empty. But not in the way I thought it would. It wasn't a feeling of loss. It was a feeling of relief. I had my space back. I had my life back. I wasn't living in a lie anymore. That night, I made myself a drink and sat on the couch, staring at the walls. For the first time in a long time, I felt at peace. There was no more drama. No more lies. No more manipulation. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't sad. I was just done. It was over. The days following Jessica's departure felt like a haze. At first, it was quiet. The silence in the apartment was almost deafening. I had gotten so used to the noise, the tension, the back and forth, that I almost didn't know how to fill the space. I would sit on the couch, staring at the walls, my mind racing with everything that had happened. But then, as the days passed, something started to shift. It wasn't like the anger just disappeared. I didn't wake up one day and feel completely at peace. But slowly, I began to feel something else. Something I hadn't felt in months. Relief. I didn't have to worry about who she was with, or what she was doing behind my back. I didn't have to wonder if she was lying to me, or if I was just being paranoid. For the first time in what felt like forever, I didn't have to second-guess myself. I spent a lot of time thinking about the relationship. About how I had ignored the red flags, about how I had put so much effort into holding on to something that was already broken. I wasn't perfect. I knew that. But I had always tried to be honest, to be true to myself, to be loyal. And somewhere along the way, that wasn't enough for her. I thought about the love I had for her. The love that, for a while, had felt real. But the more I reflected, the more I realized that the person I had loved wasn't the person I had been living with for the last few months. She had changed. And maybe I had too. But it didn't matter anymore. There were moments when I felt angry. Moments when I wanted to scream, when I wanted to call her and tell her exactly how I felt, to ask her how she could do this to me. But those moments passed. They didn't linger. The anger didn't consume me. Instead, I started to focus on myself. I began to rebuild my routine. I woke up early, went to the gym, worked on my projects, and spent time with friends who hadn't turned their backs on me. The more I did for myself, the more I felt like I was finally taking control of my life again. It was like a fog had lifted. The weight on my chest started to ease. I wasn't tied to her anymore. I wasn't tethered to the lies or the confusion. I was free. But even with all of that, there was a part of me that still felt hollow. It was a strange feeling, like I had lost a part of myself along the way. Like I had invested so much time, so much energy into a future that never came. I wasn't sure if that feeling would ever go away. Maybe it was something I would carry with me forever. But at least I knew now that I wasn't going to let it define me. I wasn't going to let her actions control my happiness, my future, or my sense of self-worth. One night, about a week after everything had settled, I went to Joseph's place for dinner. He had been my friend for years, and he had seen me go through some of my toughest times. He was the kind of friend who didn't ask too many questions but just let you talk when you needed to. We sat at his kitchen table, eating pizza and catching up. He asked how I was doing, and for the first time in a while, I actually felt like I could answer honestly. "I'm good," I said, taking a sip of my beer. "It's been hard. But I'm getting there." Joseph nodded, his expression understanding. "You know, man, sometimes it's not about the big moments. It's about the little ones. It's about taking it day by day." I smiled. "Yeah, I've been realizing that. It's not about moving on instantly. It's about finding peace with where I'm at right now. And I think I'm finally getting there." The rest of the night was easy. We didn't talk much about Jessica or what had happened. Instead, we just enjoyed the time together. We laughed, joked, and caught up on everything that had been going on in our lives. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like something was missing. I didn't feel like I was carrying the weight of my past around with me. It wasn't that I had completely forgotten about Jessica. It wasn't that I wasn't still hurt by what happened. But I was finally starting to heal. The next day, I woke up early, just like I had the past few days. I went for a run, something I hadn't done in a while. The fresh air, the cool breeze, it was the first time in months that I felt fully present. I wasn't thinking about what had happened or where I had been. I was just living in the moment. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I could breathe again. I realized that, while the relationship was over, my life wasn't. I still had so much ahead of me. I still had dreams, goals, and a future that was waiting for me to take hold of it. Maybe I wouldn't forget everything that had happened. Maybe I would always carry the scar of betrayal with me. But it wasn't going to stop me. It wasn't going to define me. I spent the next few weeks focusing on things that mattered to me. I started reading again, something I hadn't done in months. I reconnected with old friends. I worked on my career and set new goals for myself. It wasn't about filling the emptiness. It was about creating something new, something that was mine. And slowly, I realized that I didn't need her to complete me. I didn't need anyone to define my worth. The journey wasn't easy, and I knew it wasn't over. But I was finally moving forward. I was learning to trust myself again, to find peace in my own company, and to believe that I deserved better. I didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in a long time, I was excited to find out.